The last thing I felt before everything changed was the warmth of my own blanket. That specific, ordinary warmth of a bed you have slept in 1,000 times. I was 14 years old. It was a Wednesday night in June, and there was a man standing inside my bedroom. There was no sound of breaking glass, no kicked-in door, no sequence of noises that the body knows how to recognize as danger. There was only the same silence as always, and inside that silence, something that did not belong. He was standing in the dark the way someone stands in a room they already consider theirs. Still, patient. Like he had already done the hard part somewhere else, and arrived on the other side of it, decided. The voice came low, unhurried. The kind of calm that has nothing peaceful in it. It is the calm of a person who made every decision long before walking through that door, who has no doubt left in them, no hesitation. He said he had a knife. He said he would kill me and kill my family if I made a single sound. And then he waited, as if my response was just a formality, as if the outcome had already been written somewhere, and we were both just catching up to it. My little sister was asleep in the bed next to mine. Mary Catherine, 9 years old. I could hear her breathing, that long, slow rhythm of a child in deep sleep. She was not asleep. I only found that out later. She had watched everything with her eyes barely open, lying completely still, because her body had made the same calculation mine had. That stillness was the only thing that made sense. For years she carried that night as if it were her fault. As if freezing at 9 years old, alone in the dark, in front of an armed man, were a moral failure. It was not. It was just the terrible arithmetic of fear. He walked me out of my own house, through the kitchen, out the back door, across the yard, and I went. I went because he said my family. I went because the voice did not leave room for any other direction. I went because 14 years of living does not prepare a person for that moment, and nothing prepares a person for that moment. The street outside was empty. The neighborhood was asleep. The sky was clear, full of stars, completely indifferent. Somewhere down the block, a porch light glowed. Everything looked exactly the same as it always did. That is the detail that has stayed deepest. Not the fear, not the darkness, but the absolute, terrible normalcy of the world around something that was not normal at all. The night just continued. Like nothing had happened. Like I had not just been walked away from my entire life. His name was Brian David Mitchell. Before that night, he had done work around our house. Handyman jobs. He had sat at our table. My mother had offered him a coat from our closet because the weather was cold and he looked like he needed one. He had been inside our home. He had walked through our rooms. He had looked at everything. And then he had left and come back with a plan. I was not a random choice. I had been watched. Selected. The plan had existed before that night. Had been constructed quietly, in a mind I never saw. Over time I did not know was passing. That knowledge, that the horror had a long, patient prehistory, is a particular weight I have had to learn to carry separately from all the rest. The camp was hidden in the hills above Salt Lake City, far enough to disappear into, close enough that the city lights were still visible from certain angles. This soft, amber glow below, the whole ordinary world going on without any idea. A woman was there when we arrived. Wanda Barzi. She looked at me the way someone looks at a delivered package. No surprise. No hesitation. No flicker of something being wrong. Her face had the expression of a person watching an expected thing arrive on schedule. That look, that total absence of doubt, was the second thing that told me I was in a kind of danger that had no map. He called himself Emmanuel. He spoke in scripture. Every sentence he said was built from the architecture of sacred language. Verses woven through commands, prophecy wrapped around every horror. Holiness used as the frame for things that had nothing holy in them. I had been raised inside deep faith. That language was not foreign to me. It was the language I used to think about things that mattered. He knew that. He had chosen me in part because of it. He aimed his words at the places where I had always been most open, most trusting, most accustomed to accepting something larger than myself as real. It did not convert me, but it created a fog. And inside the fog, the distance between what I knew was true and what he insisted was true became harder to measure than it should have been. That is the mechanism. That is the part people struggle to understand. Not the physical captivity, but the slow erosion of the instrument you use to judge what is real. He told me I was his wife now. that my old family was my past, that if I ran, the people I loved would pay for it. He said these things without raising his voice, without theater, the way a person states something that has already been settled. And when a lie is told with that kind of certainty, repeated, daily, in the same even tone, surrounded by exhaustion and isolation and fear, it begins to occupy space. Not because you believe it, but because refuting it requires energy that captivity is specifically designed to drain from you. There were moments when the exit was right there. Physically there, measurable in footsteps. There was a grocery store, fluorescent lights, shopping carts, strangers doing ordinary things in the ordinary way strangers do. I was wearing a veil. He kept me veiled in public. That veil did two things simultaneously. It made me invisible to everyone around me, and it made me feel permanently visible to him, because I knew that he knew exactly where I was, and that knowing was its own kind of leash, one that didn't need to be held. Somewhere between the dairy section and the canned goods aisle, the thought arrived fully formed. If I scream right now, someone hears it. If someone hears it, something changes. If something changes, this might end. And then, immediately behind that thought, moving in the same direction, came another voice, and it was not entirely my voice anymore. It was his, living inside my head, asking his questions with my mouth. And then what? What do they see when they look at you? Who are you now? Where exactly do you go back to? That is the real architecture of what he built. Not a cage. A mirror, tilted at an angle that made me unrecognizable to myself. We traveled. California. San Diego. We lived on the streets for stretches of time. He preached in public. This man who had taken me would stand on sidewalks and speak in a booming voice about God and prophecy and end times, and people would pass, and some would stop, and some would give money, and not one person in any of those moments looked at the silent, veiled figure standing beside him and thought, something is wrong here. We moved through crowds for months. We were in plain sight. I was invisible inside my own disappearance. There were nights, too many to count, when I lay on the ground under the open sky and thought about my bed, the specific weight of my own blanket, the smell of my pillow, the sound my brothers made running through the hallway before dinner, my mother's face, my father's voice. I wondered if he was still out there looking. Keep looking. Please keep looking. Don't decide I'm gone. I'm not gone. I am still here. I am still here. I am still here. Those thoughts were not weakness. They were the only rope I had. The only thing connecting the person I was before that Wednesday night in June to whatever I was becoming inside those months. On March 12, 2003, 9 months and 7 days after I was taken, we were walking down a street in Sandy, Utah. A couple had seen a segment on America's Most Wanted. Something about the way we looked registered as wrong to them. They followed. They called the police. Officers came. One of them asked the man beside me who I was. Mitchell gave a name that was not mine. And I confirmed it. I used the name he had given me. The officer began to leave. He turned back. He looked directly at me and asked again. And something that I still don't have the exact right word for, something that had been accumulating for 9 months in a place I didn't know I still had, answered. I know who I think I am. I said my real name. I said, I am Elizabeth Smart. And it was over. Not with a chase. Not with a dramatic confrontation. It was over on a suburban sidewalk on an ordinary afternoon, with those 5 words, standing in the thin March light. 9 months. And it ended with me remembering what I was called. Coming home is not the end of the story. It never is. Coming home means walking back into a life that kept moving without you. Carrying something inside you that doesn't have a name yet. Something that other people can sense at the edges, but never fully see. It means rebuilding the instrument that was used against you. The capacity to trust, to feel safe, to believe that the space around you is yours. It means choosing, some days hour by hour, between the version of yourself that was damaged and the version that is still possible. I chose to testify. To sit in a courtroom and look at him and say in plain language, with nothing softened, exactly what happened. I chose to speak publicly. To become an advocate. To make the experience into something that moved outward instead of staying locked inside. Not because I am exceptional. Not because the damage wasn't real. But because I had already spent 9 months being someone else's silence. And I was finished with that. I was completely, permanently finished. I was 14 years old the night a man walked into my bedroom and decided that my life was something he could take. I wore a veil and stood in grocery stores and walked through crowds, and not one person saw what was right in front of them. I said someone else's name when a police officer asked me who I was. And then I said my own. That moment, that specific, small, irreversible moment, is the one I return to when everything else feels like too much. Not the rescue, not the courtroom, not the years of rebuilding. Just that, a street in March, a question asked twice, and the sound of my own name coming out of my own mouth. That was the moment I came back. Everything since then has been the long, hard, ongoing work of staying.